Greetings from the Ngoma Zethu podcast, episode 1. Uh, in this episode, we'll be discussing blasphemy. Now, we're discussing blasphemy not from the religious point of view, but blasphemy as a weapon against indigenous people, psychological warfare to play with their minds. Blasphemy is never a sin or an offense against God. Blasphemy is always a sin or an offense against another man. And not just like every man, but especially those men who are very homicidal and emotionally unstable, who like power. And they use their idea of protecting God to perpetrate violence or to control other people by accusing them of being blasphemous. And the reason why we're talking about this topic is that it's been effective throughout the history of colonialism, slavery, and oppression of indigenous people. Because most of the people that have done the oppression, initially when they came in with their religious books, and blasphemy always comes up. All right, and so we're going to talk about Africans, because Africans are some of the most gullible people in the world. They believe and trust people without questioning things. Throughout the history, the African history, there has been invasions, people that have come in to invade Africa. And in most cases, they've come in either through with the idea that their God is superior, or they've come in with superior weapons to subdue Africans. So we're going to start from like the 7th century, when the Arab Muslims came over and conquered North Africa, all the way to Senegal, into Guinea, Mali, all those places, to northern Nigeria, all those places. And the issue has always been a blasphemy, that when the indigenous people resist or do not want to embrace the oppression or that lifestyle that's been brought in, then the word blasphemy comes in automatically, that you are sinning against God, you're disobeying God. All right? And then the Europeans used the same trick when they came in over there, starting with the Portuguese, telling Africans that their way of life, whether it was dance, music, or their idea of spirituality, which is totally different from the European and the Muslim and the Arab idea of spirituality. The African spirituality, indigenous African spirituality, is totally different from that. So now let's get this clear. Neither Christianity nor Islam are African religions. They are not indigenous African religions. They've been planted there. And so they've been planted through tricks and also the threat of violence against African people. And this word blasphemy always comes up because no one wants to offend God. And the hustlers, the crooks, have already figured out that every time that you speak on behalf of God, or when you pretend to be protecting God's interest, some gullible people, people that are gullible, they will listen to you. People that are easily fooled, they will listen to you. And so this has been a trick, for a long time, against people. And then you ask yourself that if the God they're protecting, if somebody comes to you that you have sinned against God, that's blasphemy, and I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to give you 7 lashes, I'm going to whip you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to do whatever I want to do because you have offended God. But then the question becomes that if this God that he's protecting is so high and mighty and powerful, why would he send a very homicidal, emotionally unstable person to come and represent him? At the same time, they're also claiming that he's the God they're representing, or the God they're protecting. He's a merciful God. He's very merciful. So you can see that it's totally a very corrupt story. The whole blasphemy story is very corrupt. It's about power. It's about man wanting power. And like I've said, that indigenous people, they're not used to hearing stories like that, because their spirituality is very, it's not practiced in a sense how other religions are very definite. They have a book and they know exactly what God wants, what he said, what he didn't say. Indigenous people don't speak like that when it comes to religions. They show gratitude for what they're being given, what nature and the creator, their creator, has given them. So when somebody comes in with a story that uh, this is what God wants you to do, and if you disobey, it's blasphemy, or you're sinning against God. Or if you say that, look, no, I don't want your God, I don't want to listen to your God, automatically that becomes blasphemy, because the agenda there is to use violence or to whatever means they can use. And there's no better way to use violence against people than claim that you're defending uh, and you're protecting your God from insults from other people. So what we have to talk about here is how the masses of Black people, African people, and then their diaspora, those that were taken, kidnapped into Arabia and into the Caribbean, North America, and South America, how they have become to really believe this story about blasphemy, about like the idea of somebody being chosen by God to protect God's, like he's a bodyguard, God's bodyguard. But every time that you say, no, I don't want your God, or your God can go on, can move on, can take a hike, all of a sudden, that person have to use violence. And if you're smart enough, you realize that no, this person is just a gangster, he's a thug, and he just wants to use some other what you call a divinity or some unseen entity's powers to perpetrate violence, but it has nothing to do with like, protecting God. And so as long as we let our children suck in that story or continue to believe that African people are like real in for a big like real rough ride, like a hell of a rough ride in their lives, because it's a story that has to be put to rest once and for all, that there's no man who talks for God. There's no man who represents God. There's no man who's related to God personally. There's no man who has met God before. It's all a power struggle. Same way how when somebody shows up on my door, I'll give you an example. When somebody shows up on my door, whether it's like somebody just doing a survey from the government or census, the first thing they do is to show their badge, to introduce themselves who they are representing. And if the police came on my door for with a warrant for something like that, the first thing they do is show who they are and then show the warrant so that they're representing a high authority. So that means that they're letting you know that you should not resist their being authorized to do this. All right? And so it's the same way when somebody shows up, look, that they're perpetrating violence, and then they wave this book that they have. And then on top of that, they're talking about blasphemy, that I'm going to kill you. I'm going to do this because you're disobeying God or you say some ill things about God. It's basically the same concept that you see when somebody comes in at your door or someone shows you their credentials so that they can be let in. You go to an office building, people are walking in, and there's a security guard. The first thing they do is to show their credentials, their security badge, to show that, look, I belong here. And it's the same way. So these people, they use blasphemy as a way of convincing people that, look, no, we protect the honor of the planet, which is a lie. There's no bigger lie than tell people that, you have to, somebody has committed blasphemy. There's no bigger lie than that. It's a hassle. And it's a hassle mostly that's done in the areas of oppression. Whenever people want to oppress or they want to perpetrate some violence, that they know that just doing it without some kind of an excuse or pretext, it will look very primitive and barbaric. So they absolve themselves by pretending that they're killing or they're beating this person in the name of God. And so this blasphemy thing for Africans, you got to know that no, it's a hassle. It's not real. Human beings are very dishonest creatures. We want to survive. We like power. We like to have power. We like to have power, and by any means necessary. The reason why a gun was made is to make sure that you have power. In most cases, people say, okay, I have a gun to defend myself, where there's some people that do that. But in the end, for the most part, the gun has been used to grab power. And the religious books, they are used the same way. It's all about to grab power. So the blasphemy issue, the blasphemy issue is a very important psychological tool that people use to subdue other people, to make sure that they can control other people, because, oh, who wants to speak against God, or who wants to speak ill against God, And so for most of our people, we got to realize that we cannot continue to raise our children in this manner. We cannot continue to pass on this message about blasphemy to our children, because our ancestors didn't know any better. They had never seen that kind of trickery. They had never seen that kind of dishonesty where somebody can reclaim to be speaking on behalf of God, because it does not exist in African spirituality. People don't speak for God. So when the first people came over to Africa in the 7th century, the Arab Muslims, when they came over there, to hear somebody having that kind of like real confidence to speak for God and present himself like a representative of God on planet Earth, that's a new concept for them. And then that person goes ahead and says, look, if you don't listen to what I'm saying, you're committing blasphemy or a sin against God. That's like another powerful tool. And especially when you're not coming from a culture that's used to that, you get confused. You become dizzy. And the same with the Europeans. They did the same thing. All over Africa and the Caribbean and in Asia or wherever they went to conquer. It's the same trick. It is a trick. It is a trick. Do not be ever taught any other way. It is a trick. It's just a trick of people basically who have no shame in a lot of ways. People that have shame, like I've said in the beginning of the podcast. People that are very homicidal and emotional and unstable. So the next level, if you disagree with that, no, you can take your blasphemy and walk away. The next level is going to be violence. So you can see that there's nothing to do with God. It's just like they're unstable. They're like homicidal people. They're violent people. They want to use violence. They want to take things from others by force. So whatever trick, if they have to use a brick, a rock, a gun, a spear, if they have to claim that they're speaking for God or they know God personally is their cousin, they'll do it. They do it. And so we have to keep on telling our children, our young children, that no more, there's no more reason to have our children listen to stories like that about blasphemy. It does not exist. There's no such a thing. Because even though, say, for some reason, those people, where they're coming from, there's such a thing as blasphemy in their culture. We have already established that neither Christianity nor Islam are African religions. They're not indigenous African religions. So they cannot impose that value system upon African people. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And our people have to grow up intellectually and start to confront issues that are holding our people back. Because most African people today, they are held back by the fear of offending God or upsetting God. They're not showing up in mosque or churches because they don't want to disappoint God, which has nothing to do with God. It's have to do everything with colonialism, slavery, power. They have conquered you. So you're now, your mind is in their hands. Like the famous African philosopher, Steve Biko, he said, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So that means when they have your mind to listen to stories like, if you don't participate or agree with their God, or if you're dismissive of their God, is blasphemy. It's a sin, because they have your mind, and so when they have your mind, automatically when they say that, you're gonna forward. You're gonna submit, because your idea is not to offend the owner of this planet, the unseen entity. But it's a trick. It's a trick that should never, 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 never again be extended to our children. Our forefathers were gullible because they didn't know. They had never seen that kind of trickery, dishonesty. Those cultures are so different from African cultures. And so we have to accept that it's okay in their context, they can do that. So never again should we let our children believe in the story that they're offending a God. Never, 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 never again. That should never happen again. And in the next episode, we expand. In the next episode, we expand and talk about another very important topic of how Africans find themselves in the same cycle. It seems like things don't get better at all. Things don't get better. So we're going to talk about that in the next episode. And we'll see you next time on this Ngoma Zethu podcast. Thank you.